Hey everybody, it's Rachel from Rachel is Knitting, and today's video is my next installment in my recap series going over my most recent knitting tours in Scotland. If you're not familiar, earlier this year I hosted 2 knitting tours along with my mom, and we went from Edinburgh up to Glasgow, then Oban, then Inverness, and then back down to Edinburgh for a nice round trip journey around Scotland, specifically focusing on the Scottish Highlands. It was an incredible trip. In fact, it was 2 incredible trips, and I'm using this series as an opportunity to take you along for the ride. So, as always, I will remind you, if you need your memory jogged or if you're new to this series, take a second and go to review the first day's recap, the day 2 recap, the day 3 recap, the day 4 recap, and the day 5 recap, and then once you're all caught up, come back here and we'll get started with day 6. For both Scotland 1 and Scotland 2, we started the day with breakfast at the Best Western Palace Hotel and Spa. This is in Inverness and it's right on the River Ness, so it's a very, very cute place. It looks like no other Best Western I've ever stayed at, and I really enjoyed our time at this hotel. After we had breakfast, we got on the coach, and it was a little different between Scotland 1 and Scotland 2, because for Scotland 1, we only stayed at this hotel for 1 night, so when we left in the morning for our day's activities, we brought all of our treasures with us, whereas for Scotland 2, we got to stay 2 nights at this hotel, so we didn't have to pack everything up for our excursions on day 6. So, we'll start the day with Culloden Battlefield, which was true for both tours. We got on the bus and we made our way to this historical site. I have not very much knowledge about Culloden Battlefield outside of the wonderful show Outlander, so after having the tour of Culloden Battlefield, I know that it may be obvious, not everything in Outlander is true. I mean, duh, there's time travel. And if time travel is true, it's a big secret and we're not supposed to know about it. So anyway, Culloden Battlefield, it was a very, very insightful and somber visit. We learned about where the battle lines were drawn, the events that led up to the battle, and it was just an extremely, extremely gruesome sight. Basically, as you may be familiar with from Outlander, there are headstones that are on the battlefield to denote the different clans that fell here on this battlefield site, but really they are marking mass graves and essentially unmarked graves, even though the stones mark which clan is buried where. Really, there's no rhyme or reason to where the stones are placed, and they do not correlate to the people buried underneath them. Women, children, and men fighting in the battle are all buried in these graves. And it's just a very sobering place to be. It is so I think it is so sad. I cannot account for all of the violence and pain and destruction in the world. And you may be thinking this is not really the place to visit when you're on a knitting tour. Well, I say phooey to that. If we are going to go to a country that is not our home and we're going to be tourists and take advantage of all the wonderful happy-go-lucky things that go with, for me, knitting and wool and yarn shopping and yarn buying, I think it's disingenuous to focus only on those things and not take time to acknowledge some other very important historical sites and events that took place on the land that you are benefiting from as a tourist. And just visiting one battlefield, I completely realize is just a drop in the bucket of the things that you could do, but I think it's important and I'm glad that we went. If you're a fan of the show Outlander, you may be drawn to the Clan Fraser headstone, and you may be interested to know that that is the only headstone that is roped off. There are stakes and chains surrounding that headstone, so you cannot go up to it, and I think that is apt. I think that's fair and safe and respectful, but I did feel bad for these other headstones because, like, I don't know, the people under those headstones matter too, just because there's not a hit TV show about them. Anyway, I don't mean to get all sappy about Culloden Battlefield, but I just want to say it was a very important stop, and I'm really, really glad we went. It was educational, it was informative, it was moving, and I think it's important that we visited it. I would definitely recommend a stop at Culloden Battlefield if you are in the area. It's very, very informative, and also the indoor facilities are very nice. The gift shop has a lot of wonderful things, and there's also an interactive educational experience inside the building on the site, so you don't just have to tour the battlefield. You can also learn about it indoors. So I don't really have, I know I've gone on and on and on about Culloden Battlefield, but I don't really have the right words to describe Culloden Battlefield other than to say that it was so sad, but also so important that we went. When we were done at Culloden Battlefield, we got back on the bus, and for Scotland 1, we made our way to the Dalwhinnie Distillery. This is one of Scotland's many, many, many whiskey distilleries, and it was very fun to visit. We got to indulge in some snacks or hot chocolate or cocktails upon arrival. So Leslie and I both tried the whiskey sour, if I remember correctly, and it was very delicious. It had dehydrated raspberries on it, and I am a sucker for raspberry. Give me a raspberry in any form, any day. I will eat it. I will love it. I will be so happy. But I will tell you, between the whiskey sour and the whiskey tasting, having that much whiskey early in the morning, I learned a lot about myself, and that may not be a choice I make again in the future. But I will say the whiskey at Dalwhinnie was fabulous. It was delicious. I like whiskey. I know it's not for everyone, but I'm a big fan, and I loved the tasting. We also got to pair it with some chocolate from a local chocolatier, and it was just a fabulous, very luxe experience. We learned about adding drops of water to open up the flavor, which is something that would become a theme throughout the trip whenever we were being talked to about whiskey. We also learned things like whiskey is stored in old bourbon or sherry barrels, which can only be used once, whereas whiskey barrels can be used multiple times. And another thing we learned is that once the whiskey leaves the barrel, that is how long it has been aged. So if you have a 10-year whiskey, that means it was taken out of the barrel when it had aged 10 years. If it sits in the bottle on your shelf for 50 more years, it will still always be a 10-year whiskey. After our time at the Dalwhinnie, we stopped for lunch in Pitlochry for soup and sandwich lunches. This was a lunch that we ordered ahead of time, so the restaurant knew what options everyone had chosen. So I had soup of the day, and then I believe my sandwich was a cucumber and smoked salmon sandwich. Absolutely delicious. After lunch, we got back on the bus and we made our way to Dundee for a private after-hours visit of the V&A Design Museum. Now, I have to say, true confession here, I did not make the most of the visit at the V&A. I was a little worn out from the whiskey tasting, I have to be honest with you. And in my mind, I thought, it's okay, I'm going to be back here for Scotland too, and I will be bigger, better, faster, stronger, smarter, wiser. You know, I will have more energy and I'll be able to really appreciate these exhibits when I'm back for Scotland too. Well, guess what, dear listener? I wasn't coming back for Scotland too. I had forgotten that this was one of the differences between our two itineraries. So you don't have a lot of footage to enjoy from the V&A, but I will tell you, it was very, very cool, even though I was tired and a little bit loopy, but it was super, super cool. There was a lot of textile focused items in the exhibit currently on, which was Garden Futures. I'm not sure if it's still on at the V&A, but it was cool because there were pieces that were collaborated with from people we had met or would meet later in the trip. Like Deborah Gray had a piece that she helped dye, and Di Gilpin had a piece in the exhibit. There was also a massive rug that had just been finished at Dovecote Studio. So it was just a really full circle moment, and I wish that I could go back and appreciate it more, but I was just so run down from the day's activities leading up to the V&A Design Gallery visit. But if you're ever in Dundee, I think you should definitely take the time to go visit the V&A. They have rolling exhibits that change, I'm assuming seasonally or maybe quarterly, or maybe it's not as structured as that, but the exhibits change depending on what time of year you go, and they are focused on design. So that might be textile design, it might be cinematography, it might be whatever other kind of design that could be featured. There's also a V&A museum in London. I haven't been to that one, but I do highly recommend this one in Dundee. After we were done at the V&A, we made the very quick trip to our hotel in Dundee. We stayed at the Apex City Quay, and we could actually see the V&A from our window along with the water, so that was really fun and nice. After we got settled into our room, which, by the way, this is what the room looks like, and the bathroom, and it was a very nice hotel. But after we got settled in, we made our way down to the hotel restaurant for our hotel dinner. Here's a look at the menu we had. For our starter, we had smoked cheddar arancini with spicy tomato sauce and red pesto. We had chicken breast with haggis for our main course, and our dessert was Rosie's handmade sticky toffee pudding with caramel sauce and clotted cream ice cream. Now, this was an incredible meal. The starter was delicious. The main was incredible. If you think you won't like haggis, I say give it a try. What if it changes your life? You won't know until you try it, and it may be your new favorite thing. But I loved it. Between the starter, the main, and the dessert, this meal was 10 out of 10. And I have to say, I just really love having my brand name on a menu. That is very, very, very nice. Now, you may think you're off the hook for day 6, that we've wrapped it in a bow and we're all ready to call it a day. Well, you're wrong, because if you recall, there are differences between the itineraries on Scotland 1 and Scotland 2 for today's recap. So let's go back in time, back to when we left Culloden Battlefield. For Scotland 2, we did not make our way to Dalwhinnie Distillery. In fact, we made our way to something entirely different, a cashmere mill. This was incredible! We made our way to Johnstons of Elgin, and this is the last vertical mill in Scotland. This means that they do everything in-house, from dyeing the fiber to processing the fiber to spinning the fiber to weaving the fiber. All of these things they do on site. So Johnstons of Elgin was a very, very cool, and I have to say, I don't know, I felt like I did not belong there. It's like they were, any second they were going to find out that I shouldn't be there, because listen, the things that they had for sale in the company store were, to me, astronomically expensive. And I don't think that is necessarily indicative of, I don't think they're priced unfairly necessarily. I don't know. They're pure cashmere. These are really luxury products. But like a bathrobe was over £1,000. A scarf was like 90 pounds. A pair of socks, if I remember correctly, was like 80 pounds. So these are very high-end, high-priced goods. So I did not buy any souvenirs here. I don't know if that's shocking to you to know, but that was outside my pay grade. But it was really cool to be in the presence of such luxury items. And when we did the mill tour, we couldn't take photos in certain buildings, so you'll just have to take my word for it. But we got to see some items from name brands like Burberry and like upcoming designs. Very, very cool. So we got to learn all about the history of this mill and the families that have owned it, the workers that lived on site and how they were treated and how they performed this work, a little bit about weaving in general, and it was just so educational and so cool. I mean, look at this giant vat of cashmere. That is full of cashmere. That's nuts. That is so nuts. And since we were here on a weekend, none of the operational floors were in operation, so we just got to see it in kind of a state of stasis, which was nice because that meant that it was quiet on the floor, so our tour guide could really go in depth and we could hear everything that he was saying, and it was just fabulous to learn about. I've been to a few mills now at this point, but nothing of this scale. It really blew my mind, and I'm so glad that we got to go visit this very, very cool place. We got to feel the different different cashmere fibers at different states of processing. Oh, and this is really cool. When we were in the old manor house, there's a picture of King Charles on the wall, and he was sitting in this chair that looked just like a chair in the room that we were standing in for the tour. And so I got up the courage to ask our tour guide if there were other chairs like that on the premises, and he's like, no, I don't think we have any others like this. So I was led to believe that the chair in the room was the same chair in the photo that had the royal bottom sitting on it. So then I sat on the chair. So basically, if you want my autograph, I am 1 degree of separation away from King Charles in the form of this chair that I sat on. Anyway, the grounds of Johnstons of Elgin, perfectly beautiful, lots of flowers in bloom. Visiting Scotland in the springtime was a joy from start to finish, so especially seeing these really well landscaped and curated grounds of the different places we were visiting, it was just a real treat. I must quickly mention also that we had afternoon tea at Johnstons of Elgin because they have a cute little cafe on site. And this was one of the best meals on Scotland too. The clotted cream, delicious. The sandwiches, incredible. The desserts and pastries, unbelievable. Loved our time at Johnstons of Elgin. Once we finished our mill tour, we got back on the coach, of course, with our knitting in tow, and we knit our way all the way back to Inverness to stay our second night at the Palace Hotel and Spa. But that's not all that we did once we got back. We had a very exciting pop-up shop in the hotel. So we had Wildwood Stitches, which is a bag company. Harriet of Wildwood Stitches makes these beautiful, gorgeous project bags, and I did come away with some project bags. And then we also had Black Isle yarns. These are, I believe, naturally dyed yarns using mostly Scottish native plants, plants native to Scotland is what I'm trying to say. And the yarn was all natural wool, just gorgeous. And like always, as long as there's yarn for sale and we have a group of these tour participants in a room, we just go feral. We just go nuts. So we bought a lot of yarn and a lot of bags. Personally, I came away with a project bag and a little notions pouch in the purple Highland cow design. The bottom of these bags is Harris tweed, so very luxe product. Very sturdy, very high quality. I'm very happy with my purchases. And in fact, upon returning home, I placed an order for the large sweater-sized project bag, and I'm so glad that I have the full collection now in my possession. I also got some mini skeins from Black Isle Yarns that I'm thinking I will use in the Edinburgh doodle set that I got at Ginger Twist. So I think that's just going to be great. This was Susan's idea, and I just think you're a genius, Susan. So we'll have matching Edinburgh doodles, but I haven't cast on yet. I don't know when that will happen, but it will happen one day. So thus ends the day 6 recap. Thank you so much for sticking around and making it to the end of this recap. I'd love it if you would let me know in the comments what part was your favorite, whether you were there in person or you're just experiencing it through these recaps. I think for me, the Cashmere Mill Tour was really special, and I'm going to go with that as my favorite part of day 6. But come back here to watch the day 7 recap. The best way to do that is to subscribe to my channel and make sure that you have the notification bell clicked on, because you never know when the day 7 recap will drop. Something you can look forward to on the day 7 recap includes another distillery visit. On Scotland 2, we go to Dewars Aberfeldy Distillery, and on Scotland 1 for day 7, we get to enjoy a Dye Gilpin workshop, St. Andrew's afternoon tea, and an alpaca farm visit. So day 7 is really something to look forward to, and I hope you'll come back to enjoy it with me. So that's all for now. I hope you're having a great day, and I'll see you next time.